For all the flack that CNN gets, and for all the flack I give them, I gotta give credit where credit is due and pay my respects when people do good things. Because CNN platformed 5 conservative women to ask them about Brett Kavanaugh and the allegations against them. And I think CNN should probably platform 5 left-leaning women for the same reason. But a lot of people are going to claim that, CNN is super biased against Trump, and I do believe that to be the case. I really do. You've had Don Lemon directly call Trump racist. That's an opinion. I mean, he alleges it's a fact, but no, seriously, it is an opinion based on the fact that people can't even define race in the same way. And I would actually argue, based on some conversations I've had with lawyers, if you call someone racist, it's not a false statement of fact. Whether or not someone is racist is entirely an interpretation or opinion of someone. So thus, when I see CNN do stuff like that, I gotta say, look, your hosts are opinionated for the most part. But don't get me wrong. MSNBC is more opinionated, and so is Fox News. I always tell people, avoid commentary from big sources, but the news tends to be okay. I use CNN as a source. I do. Because when they report things, it's totally fine. Sometimes, right? I don't know how to weigh like when the reporting is good or bad, because there have been instances where CNN had to retract people. Some people got fired, and recently they refused to correct a story that even the Washington Post said was fake, right? So they're not perfect, and I would actually say that CNN is not in my list of like go-to sources. I would say like the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal are like what I would consider to be tier 2, meaning they're pretty good, but they're partisan. But the AP, Reuters, ABC, PBS, NPR, well, actually, I take NPR's partisan, so they'll go down 1 to tier 2. But the tier 1, the top, the best, AP, Reuters, ABC, CBS, NBC are better than everyone else. They're not perfect. They get things wrong, but they're really, really good. And so, we'll go through this story in a second. I just want to make a quick point that I'm so frustrated by these accusations against me that simply because I have criticized the media a lot, I somehow don't like them or think they're unworthy or something of that nature, which is far from the truth. I've given guest presentations at Columbia's J School on more than one occasion. I was a speaker for the Online News Association and attended more than one time. I've spoken at News Exchange and many of these organizations surrounded by journalists. And my goal is not to say, don't read the mainstream media. No, in my opinion, mainstream sources are much safer than many alternative sources. However, within the mainstream, you have sites like the Huffington Post, which is fairly partisan and misleading. You have Mike, you have The Verge, you also have Breitbart, you have the Daily Caller, you have the New York Post, right? You got to be really careful about whatever it is you're reading, because you will start to find yourself falling into a bubble. And that's why I say AP and Reuters, some of the best fact-based stuff. But don't get me wrong, a lot of people watch news for analysis. A lot of people read certain websites for analysis. And analysis is opinion, sort of. You know, if someone's going, like what I do on my channel, totally analysis, right? What I try to do on my main channel is give you the news right up front, and then then I'll show more context, and then I give you my opinion and analysis on that story. And that means, based on what I know and what I can see, I can only talk about what I know and what I can see and how I feel about things and what I think about things. And that means it's not what I do 100% fact-based. There's a lot of people who say that I'm being objective, but hold on. I don't think I'm being entirely objective. I think I'm trying to be honest. And so when I pull up stories, when I see CNN doing this, I'm grateful that CNN had these women on. And we'll play the video. But it doesn't mean that I see the full picture. It doesn't mean that there is a true, pure objectivity, but there is honesty. And while I would say that certainly I have opinions, and I believe in free speech and free expression, and I myself am a liberal, I believe in trying to be as honest as possible, because we're never going to solve the world's problems by trying to trick other people, right? It's just never going to happen. I don't believe that I can successfully pull a fast one over on you. It does work for some people. It really does. And then we see these news organizations pump out total BS, like that, alternative influencer thing. And I'll just, one more point before we get into this. What am I supposed to say when the New York Times reporter, when Vox, when The Verge, Vox, Ezra Klein himself promotes this, when The Verge writes about it, when The Guardian does, when Mike does, and I tell all of these people, hey, just want to let you know, the study is factually incorrect. And they say, and they do nothing. They don't correct. They just say, well, whatever the study says. And it's not even a study, for that matter. It is the Alternative Influencer Network If you're not familiar, it's like claiming that a bunch of people on YouTube are somehow connected and radicalizing people. And it's absolutely not true, because I'd have to imagine if you're someone who likes, anarcho-capitalism and you come to my channel, you're actually going to hear liberal arguments. Maybe that radicalizes you because you hate me. I have no idea. But it's just absolutely absurd. And now I can say that I do have confirmation through a news outlet that, at least privately, so this is hearsay, but I'm being told by a journalist they have admitted fault, right? So they have admitted that there's the influencer network is confusing and incorrect. So we'll see what comes of that. But let's take a look at what CNN did with Brett Kavanaugh. So this is from the Daily Wire. Daily Wire being a conservative outlet, I believe it's Ben Shapiro's. CNN interviewed a group of Republican women in Florida for a segment that aired on Thursday night about whether they believe Judge Brett Kavanaugh's denial that he ever engaged in any kind of sexual misconduct with Christine Blasey Ford. A show of hands, how many of you believe Judge Kavanaugh when he says this didn't happen? All 5 women raised their hands. It's actually really interesting, and I disagree with some of their statements on why they're okay with it. One woman says, "What 17-year-old man hasn't done this?" And when I saw that, I was like, whoa, dude, I've never pinned a woman down and groped her. That's ridiculous. And I'd have to argue that the overwhelming majority of guys have never pinned a woman down, put their mouth over their hand, and groped them. So it was this woman, she's acting on the premise that even if it did happen, what 17-year-old guy hasn't done something like this? And I'm like, whoa, wow, yikes, man. I never did. That's crazy. I mean, maybe I'm just a pansy white knight liberal, I guess, but I don't know if they're, look, I'm going to say it. This woman's opinion I disagree with, and I'd have to argue that conservatives are, traditionalists are going to be way more likely to not have done something like this. We hear all these stories about white, male, or not necessarily white, but like male feminist allies who turn out to be abusers. We don't, so that seems kind of crazy to me that she's going to make that, a thing. So let's, it's 3 minutes long, but let's just play some of it. And first, I want to jump to the part where they all raise their hands, because I think that's right here.
Show of hands, how many of you believe Judge Kavanaugh when he says this didn't happen?
I believe him.
Believe him too.
I do believe him. I believe him.
How can we believe the word of a woman of something that happened 36 years ago when this guy has an impeccable reputation? There was nobody that has spoken ill will about him. Everyone that speaks about him, this guy's an altar boy, a scout. He's, because one woman made an allegation. Sorry, I don't buy it.
But in the grand scheme of things, my goodness, there was no intercourse. There was maybe a touch.
Right.
Can we really? 36 years later, she's still stuck on that? Had it happened?
I mean, we're talking about a 15-year-old girl, which I respect. I'm a woman, I respect. And we're talking about a 17-year-old boy in high school with testosterone running high. Tell me what boy hasn't done this in high school. Please, I would like to know. Why
would she come forward if this wasn't true?
Me? Jeez. I don't know, man. I'm pretty sure, am I crazy? But I feel like most guys are going to be like, yeah, I've never done that. So there's a friend of mine. She works for progressive news outlets. She's far lefty. And she once asked me, she said, Tim, like, how many of your male friends are okay with rape? And I was like, what? 0. Absolutely not. Are you joking? And she was like, really though? Like, how many? And I was like, I would never be friends with someone who was okay with rape. Like, period. And she was like, really? And I'm like, oh my God. I'm in Brooklyn. I'm a skateboarder. We roughhouse. We play video games. We're nerds. We're gamers. Well, I don't like to say I'm a gamer because I'm not like a diehard. I play some games sometimes. But my friends certainly are. They play a lot of Magic and various video games. Like, I got a friend who plays Destiny nonstop. So we hang out. And these are the people that are supposedly, toxic and all that, playing Magic the Gathering, this overly male-dominated thing. She asked me how many of my friends are okay with rape. And I'm like, if anyone in our circle at any point ever bragged or like positively spoke of doing even something like that, pinning a woman down, putting their hand over their mouth and groping them, we'd be like, the fuck is wrong with you, dude? Like, that's like a transgression that would probably get them booted out. Like, I'm sorry, if somebody in my circle playing cards with me started bragging about that stuff, I'd be like, dude, if you're not serious, you need to leave. Like, I'm not okay with that in any way. But I don't know where she grew up. Maybe things really were that bad back in the day. Maybe not. I don't know. I was actually really surprised to hear that. But, you know, in that, you end up having, you know, all of these women defend Brett Kavanaugh. But they do bring up a good point. One of the points they bring up is that it's 36 years, right? Why hasn't this woman come forward? Well, hold on. There's an argument for that because sometimes coming forward is rather difficult and many women don't ever come forward. So I can respect that. However, we're at a conundrum where there's no evidence and there's actually evidence to the contrary. All we have so far is he said, she said. However, there are two he's in the circumstance. You've got this guy, Mark Judge, I believe his name is, and Brett Kavanaugh saying it never happened. And this woman, Christine Blasey Ford, saying it did. And thus, if we're supposed to look at this objectively and honestly, all I can say is, look, if you've got two witnesses denying it, I understand. Like, I'll say something that's probably controversial. I would weigh her testimony above Brett Kavanaugh's and Mark Judge's. I would. However, you still have two people, you know, saying it didn't happen, and thus the combined statements of these two men reject her statement. And there's nothing I can really do that. I'm trying to be fair and honest. And so, you know, here we are left with a situation where all we can really say is, like, I just don't think there's anything we can do, unfortunately. So perhaps, you know, it really does make sense to hear what she has to say. But these women do bring up another really good point. If the reason she came forward now is because he's being nominated for the Supreme Court, the argument is that she decided to speak up due to her moral obligation to oppose this man who once wronged her, but she didn't speak up when he was appointed as a federal judge in the first place. So it's, you know, I understand the Supreme Court is huge, but a federal judge is really important. You'd imagine that still, I should say the argument is, when Brett Kavanaugh was appointed as a federal judge, why didn't she speak up then? And yes, it's nuanced, nothing's definitive. You could easily just argue that she didn't think of it as that important. That wasn't big, you know, there wasn't news about it. He wasn't doing these hearings. But I do think one last thing I want to say on this, because, you know, honestly, I don't know what the right thing to do is in circumstances like this. I think if you know, Trump is saying that he's fine with it, and the Democrats are with the hearing and having her testify, then you know what? Have her testify by all means. Like, if there's no strong objections to it, if people are open to it, and then, you know, what can you do? But yeah, I don't know. I guess that's about it. I was going to make another point, but I'm sure this is just going to be a really touchy issue with people on the right saying it's a scheme, you know, it's planned. Oh, but you know, I do want to say one more thing. This woman, Christine Blasey Ford, according to the news, her confidence was betrayed by the I believe it was like a Democrat who she gave the letter to. She expected confidentiality, and her name was immediately leaked. And I take offense to that, right? And the reason is, I have never violated someone's confidence. You know, I wouldn't betray a source. There are things that I know that I can't report on because I wouldn't be able to get anybody on the record anyway. But, you know, there are things I think people should know that I can't report on as a journalist and a reporter who has the confidence of some people, and that's just the way it is. There's no political gain that I'm willing. There's no agenda that I'm willing to support that would violate the confidence of off-the-record discussions. I know it's not true for a lot of people who work in news, but it is what it is. Anyway, this was really interesting. So I guess the last thing I'll say is, hey man, you can say CNN's bad most of the time, but they do have some things like this, and I think them putting 5 conservative women on TV for them to explain their position and give them the time to say why they trust and believe Brett Kavanaugh is respectable entirely. So hey, it is what it is. But stick around. I've got a couple more videos coming up in just a few minutes.